Now we're going to look at the difference between biotic and abiotic factors. Normally when you have an A before a word, it means not, like symmetrical and asymmetrical. It means symmetrical and not symmetrical. So we have biotic and not biotic. We'll watch this video, just 5 minutes long.
Hello nature lovers, and welcome to another exciting episode of Environmental Systems and Societies. Today's video is all about abiotic and biotic factors in an ecosystem. And what I mean by that is when you look at a forest like this, you see water and rocks and moss and sunlight. You might feel the wind, but do you ever think about how those things combine to make a specific forest instead of a desert or a mountain? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. And ecosystems, they typically are made up of things like organisms, and then they're also made up of the physical environment, like the amount of sunlight and the amount of water and the amount of temperature and the seasons. And then it's also all about how those things interact with each other. Okay, so how sunlight interacts with a plant to make glucose. That's what this is all about. Well, let's start with the living side because we're more familiar with that. So living components of an ecosystem are called biotic factors. And this cow and this rabbit are biotic factors. They include living things like the plants and like the fish and like the otters, but they also include the products of those things. So this otter might poop, and the poop from the otter absolutely counts as a biotic factor. The leaves, when they fall off this tomato plant, may count as a biotic factor. The interaction between the fungus and the tree counts as a biotic factor. Okay, so here's some examples of organisms: animals, plants, fungus, bacteria, and some people would argue viruses. Okay, now what are some actual products of it? Well, you get honey, you get urine. Those things are biotic factors. You get poop, you get nectar, you get their carcasses when they die, when we die. You get leaves that fall off trees, and that ends up being a biotic factor, even though it's not living anymore. And it's also how these things interact with each other. Okay, so sometimes just us breathing in and out air is an interaction, but it's like how predators react with their prey. And it's how parasites react with their host or interact with their host. And it's how pollinators interact with their flowers and the plants and the relationships between these things. Those are all considered biotic factors, and those specific biotic factors help define a unique, specific ecosystem. Can you dig it? But that's not all. You also have the non-living side, which we call abiotic factors. And this is physical and chemical components of an ecosystem. So of course, sunlight and rain, those are kind of physical. You have temperature, that's physical. It includes all sorts of stuff though. It includes the chemistry. So it includes like the pH of the soil or the pH of the water, or how much salt's in the water. It includes the atmosphere and the chemical makeup of the atmosphere. It includes how bright the sun's shining. It includes if it's spring or summer or autumn or winter, and do all those things exist in that place. These things define what an ecosystem is, and especially when they combine and interact with biotic elements. You put them all together and that makes a specific place. But what's cool is these factors can limit each other. They can limit how much one can grow or how much one can grow. And so let me give you an example. If you look at phosphates, which are basically 4 oxygens and a phosphorus atom, they are usually in limited supply in water. And so this green algae wouldn't necessarily cover the pond like this because there wouldn't be enough phosphates for it to grow like that. But when we add pollution to water in the form of detergents that have phosphates in them, all of a sudden that limiting factor is removed, and now the algae can explode, and we call it an algae bloom. And it takes over these rivers and these ponds because there's more phosphates. It no longer limits its growth. Okay, that happens with lots and lots of factors, and we'll talk about this. So let's look at this oak tree to kind of summarize the conversation. That oak tree is competing, it's biotic, but it's competing for this abiotic resource of sunlight with other biotic trees and plants. Okay, it takes that sunlight and it turns it into energy via photosynthesis. At this point, we have a new biotic element here, this fungus, and this fungus is growing on the tree and it's stealing the glucose that the plant made. But to make that glucose, the plant needed water. So it gets the water by sending these roots down into the soil, which is abiotic, and pulls the abiotic water up into its body, which is biotic, and turns it into glucose. And then it's in its leaves, but every season, every fall, these leaves fall to the ground and they're dead and they decay, and their molecules, even though the leaves are biotic, their molecules, once they're decomposed, become abiotic. And this is how all these things are interacting, and they make a specific ecosystem. I hope this made sense about abiotic and biotic factors and how they define an ecosystem. If it didn't, please let me know. Otherwise, peace out, homie.
Yes, I think we get the idea. So, biotic and abiotic is to do with living and non-living things. So, the living things in an ecosystem are called biotic factors. And these living things include plants, animals, bacteria, fungi, and more. The non-living parts of an ecosystem are called abiotic factors. And in an ecosystem, some abiotic factors are sunlight, temperature, atmospheric gases, water, and soil. An example, in a river, in a freshwater river, the dissolved oxygen is needed by the fish to breathe. If the temperature of the water becomes too high, algae will start to grow. They use all the oxygen and the fish die. So this is an example of an ecosystem. Try to classify the blue words as biotic or abiotic. And there you have it.